Hello again. I'm speaking to you from my bedroom, and outside it's a very cold, rainy day, probably about 45 to 50 degrees outside, nice and warm inside my bedroom, aka studio, here in northwest Greensboro, North Carolina. Some would say I had this buddy in high school named Frank, and he would sometimes, this is the kind of day where the weather outside is raw. Of course, there were other things that we discussed that could be raw, but they are not appropriate for this broadcast at this time. Now, let me talk to you about what happened last weekend at the fall quarterly meeting of the North Carolina Federation of Young Republicans. Now, let me first say that a few years ago when I lived in Wilmington, North Carolina, any of the county GOP meetings I would attend, the general county GOP meetings that I would attend, it kind of got to be a little bit of a running joke. Is like because a lot of the questions that the all the older people in the Republican Party would ask me is like, "Hey Bobby, what are the YRs up to? Hey Bobby, what are the YRs doing?" And it's like, and I'll tell you, about 85 to 90% of the time, I had no answer for them. It just was a group that met. We tried to have meetings. When we had meetings, we would do, the meeting would be 10 minutes long. And then, we'd be at a bar and people would want to go drink beer, and that would be the meeting. Fortunately, though, I'm here to tell you that now the NCYRs are very different. Very different in a good way. This is not your older brother or older sister's YR group, and this is certainly not your father's YR organization either. This is actually a group of people that, the meetings are going to be very substantial, they're going to be very whole, and you're actually going to have more than 10 minutes of content. This meeting, I'm proud to say, was about a good about a 4-hour long meeting. Okay, now we had breaks every now and then, but yeah, it was a very substantial meeting. Back in the past, maybe you had a convention every couple years or so if you were lucky. Now we have conventions every single year. We even have quarterly meetings now. It's really and the person to thank for this work is my good friend Catherine Whiteford, who has really, it's one thing to see somebody run for office and tell you what you want to hear, but it's a whole nother thing when that person wins office and they actually do what they say they're going to do, okay? And they actually do a good job at it. So we here at the Conservative Pelican want to salute Miss Whiteford for that. We'll also need to thank Miss Alyssa Batts for she actually organized this meeting and brought this quarterly meeting to the Guilford County Republican headquarters right here in Greensboro, about a 5 to 7 minute drive from my house. So nice for her to do that. And lunch, we had that catered by Chick-fil-A, and we had the Mid-Atlantic's head Sentinel for Heritage Action. I forget the lady's name, but you know who you are, so I'll say thank you for that. So anyway, this meeting started, and unlike a lot of YR meetings in the past, we did really good on time. Registration, I looked at the agenda that was sent out a couple weeks before the meeting. It was supposed to be registration 11 to 12, lunch from 12 to 1. So I got there about 11:45, 11:50, and as soon as I sat down and started eating my lunch, the program actually started. So we actually did very good on time in that aspect. So I missed a lot of what Congressman Mark Walker and Congressman Ted Budd said. I did not really take any notes then, but I'll tell you that Congressman Walker, basically gave a really good motivational speech, which it's not hard for him to do because he used to be a pastor over at Lawndale Baptist Church for about 12 years. He's been in Congress, was elected in Congress in 2014. But he said, look, doesn't matter where you came from, where you went to school, you can be anything, basically. A very basic speech. And he talked about, he actually got a degree in business from Piedmont International University, a school I've never heard of. A lot of people have never heard of Piedmont International. He went to go work in the business office at Flow Automotive Group, which is a automotive dealership group all around Greensboro and Winston-Salem. After doing that for a few years, felt called to the ministry, so went off to seminary and became a preacher. And then 12 years after that, decided to run for Congress, right? So think about it. A person who got a business degree from Piedmont International and then went to seminary and became a preacher, now is a member of Congress. So just think about that. You just have to get the right. If you get a college education, you can, be anything you can be, basically, right? And even if you go to a trade school, a lot of these trade schools, you get it. If you have the, because look, I'll tell you right now that I do not have the ability to be a electrician, plumber, any of the trades. I do not have that ability. Okay. But I do have the ability to, do spreadsheets and that kind of thing. So that's why I'm getting a business degree. It's a 4-year degree rather than go into a trade. So some people, you have to have that aptitude. So don't be thinking, I'll go into a trade, make lots of money, and then, go do something else. You have to have that sort of aptitude, Of course, there's lots of career aptitude tests out there you can take and what have you. Anyway, back to the YRs. And then we had the chairman of the North Carolina Republican Party, Michael Whatley, give a very good speech talking about what in the world is happening right now with the state Republican Party. And really the hot topic right now is redistricting. He mentioned that based on these new districts that were just passed, actually like the day before the meeting on November 15th, looks like Virginia Foxx and Patrick Mahenry are going to be double bunked in a single district. George Holden's district is now going to go from it's going to go to a 60-40 majority Democrat district. But he also said the districts could be thrown out still. There's also a lawsuit, believe it or not, filed by Eric Holder on November 15th, right after these new districts passed. So Eric Holder is suing again for these new districts, even though the districts would go from most likely 10-3 Republican majority to an 8-5 Republican majority. And when I say Republican majority, I mean majority of congressmen in the state of North Carolina. Okay. But Whatley also said it looks pretty likely that we're going to need to create new executive committees to match the districts. What does he mean by that? Well, for example, right now I am in Congressional District 13. I was elected as a member at large back at the district convention in April. But these new districts that have drawn have moved the 13th district south and west of Greensboro. Now I am in the 6th congressional district, and the 6th congressional district would be all of Guilford County and then a piece of Forsyth County. And this piece of Forsyth County is looking like it's going to be the very democratically heavy voting, looks like the predominantly African American part of Winston-Salem is going to be in this new 6th district. More than likely, at these districts hold, I'm going to have to run for a seat on the 6th District Executive Committee. And this is something that's going to be talked about a lot at the State Executive Committee meeting 2 weeks from today on December 7th. That meeting starts at 2 o'clock. It's going to be at the Hilton North Hills, I believe. Right there off of I-440, somewhere in Raleigh, at 2 p.m. Okay. But the good news is the court cases should be resolved in a few weeks, and by the March 3rd primary date, Whatley says that we should have, all the new executive committees for these congressional districts should be in place. Okay. Then he talked about we're going to have one of the most expensive U.S. Senate races in the entire country in 2020. In 2014, $84 million was spent by the Democrats, and Thom Tillis, the Republican nominee in that race, was outspent by a 2-1 margin. Yet he still won by like 2 points, by the hair on his chinny chin, right? But also, as we get out the vote for 2020, it should be known that just in the last 3 years since the 2016 election, the population of North Carolina has grown by 2.5%. So it's something we definitely need to account for in the 2020 election proceedings. Now we proceed on to our business meeting of the NCYRs. It should be noted that from March 21st to March 25th of 2020, there's going to be a YR leadership conference in Washington, D.C. And then we had State Representative John Hardister, who's also now the National Committee man for North Carolina for the YRs. He spoke and says, look, the left is focused on politics, the right is focused on actually governing and getting stuff done. The media is not GOP friendly, so we as activists have to get the word out. He says as National Committee man, he is now responsible for raising money, and says that the YRs really need to go after the free market economy and the opportunities that exist for the millennial generation. He also says that it's great to see the 4 youngest members of the State House are, guess what? They're all Republicans. That's pretty amazing to hear. That's great news. We had a Secretary of State candidate, E.C. Sykes, speak, and he spoke, says, well, the role of the Secretary of State office is economic growth, also job growth. Mr. Sykes has served 35 years as a business officer, and this is his first time ever running for elected office. He says he created 10,000 jobs and he has cut cost of doing business by over 25%. He wanted us to know that, of course, the United States of America was founded as a Christian nation and was started because of people who were fleeing England for fear of religious persecution. Okay. North Carolina Senate. Seat Senate District 27. Sebastian King is running for this seat. This seat used to be Republican for several years, held under Trudy Wade, who's also going to run again. So we are going to have a primary. Now it's represented by Do Nothing, Follow Cooper by whatever means necessary, Michael Garrett. Bleh. He says, look, Sebastian King said teachers make a huge impact on me. Governor Cooper and Michael Garrett have vetoed every single pay raise that has been passed by the Republicans. And it also should be known that Mr. King was a former policy advisor for John Hardister. Also, Mr. King worked on the mental health facility not actually building, but the paperwork, the the business documents. And this is a $10 million investment for Guilford County, but Michael Garrett voted against the state budget that contained funding for this mental health center. Okay, and you want everybody to remember that he's on Facebook, Sebastian King for NC. Now a report from the chairwoman, Catherine Whiteford. She says lots of deployments have gone on, even in this off election year. The group knocked on a lot of doors in Granville County in the little town of Stem, which had 500 residents, and the GOP candidate won by only 4 votes. The group also knocked on 22,000 doors for congressional candidate Dan Bishop in the 9th District, and he won that race by 4,000 votes. So you can see here how the YRs, we do work and we help get Republicans elected. I mean, getting Republicans elected should be the purpose of every single GOP group, right? Right. Okay. Also, some of them even went down to Mississippi in the governor's race and got that governor elected. I believe his last Tate Reeves. Yeah, that's the name. Also, 2 new clubs have recently created, Smoky Mountain YRs and the Asheville YRs. And now there's a grand total of 26 YR clubs across North Carolina. Very impressive work in the Whiteford administration. Okay. The summer YR quarterly meeting in 2020 is going to be hosted, it's going to be the weekend right before the Republican National Convention in Charlotte, the weekend right before. And this is actually the national quarterly meeting. This will be the first time in over a decade that North Carolina has hosted a YR quarterly meeting. Also, a new logo, which is a really cool logo, with an airplane, because North Carolina first in flight. The Wright brothers, Kitty Hawk, all that stuff that you should know from American history. We have a new logo with an airplane that has now been put into practice. And also, it should be noted that 6 people attended the fall national YR meeting in Nashville, but only 3 were needed. So this really shows that North Carolina has a very strong group of YRs working for the group. Next, we heard from First Vice Chair Nora Troutman from the Charlotte area. Basically talked about, make sure everybody was registered to volunteer for the Republican National Convention coming up next year. Second Vice Chair Chase Gaines said, look, we just need more people to get involved with the YRs. And also he talked about knocking on doors in Granville County for County Commission candidate Frank Shelton, who won his race too. So a lot of great success when YRs go out and knock on doors together, as you can see. And then John Hardister, as RNC committee man, talked about the new district lines. The North Carolina House and Senate districts, those districts are good to go. All the lawsuits and red tape have been resolved, thankfully. The U.S. Congress is far from being resolved, unfortunately. And he even said that the congressional primary could be delayed. As of the taping of this video commentary on November 23rd, a judge has ordered that candidate filing cannot begin and congressional primaries cannot take place until this particular judge court has said so. So far, yes, congressional filing and congressional primary has been put on hold. For all the other races, however, candidate filing will begin on Monday, December 2nd. The primary will take place on March 3rd. Now, what I predict is going to happen is we're going to have a delay for the congressional seats. Filing is going to be in like February or March, and then the actual primary is going to probably take place in May or June. That's my prediction. Then we, let's see here. Catherine Whiteford talked about doing some legislative action days in Raleigh, and talked about, getting a resolutions committee together as well as a policy chair in the group as well. The annual convention for the YRs is scheduled to take place on May 2nd in Wilmington. It will be sponsored in part by the Lower Cape Fear YRs, which I used to be a member of a few years ago. Thankfully, some new people are running it now. Thankfully. A goal of this federation, the NCYRs, is to get contact from now until the November 2020 election, is to get contact over 500,000 voters and increase the membership of the NCYRs by 25%. Miss Whiteford also mentioned that Eastern North Carolina is a priority for getting more chapters established in that part of the state. And also, she wants to create an incentive program to have free happy hour drinks and also free hotel rooms for quarterly meetings for those YR, as a way of for the YRs to accomplish their goals. Now we talked about districts. Dividing the state up into districts where each district will have a chair. Let's see. But right now, according to the Constitution, we're limited to only 5 regions. So we have an East region, which goes from Virginia all the way down to like Myrtle Beach, and then as far west as I-95. That's a huge area. West part is basically the mountains. That's also a huge region. Charlotte area, the Triad area, and Triangle and Sandhills, which goes from Virginia all the way down to like the Fayetteville area too. Another big region. Someone made a motion that Catawba County be moved from the mountains to the Charlotte region as well. That makes sense because Catawba County is in the Charlotte TV market, and not the Asheville TV market. So, makes sense. Then, Heritage Action for America did an impact training, talked about the Daily Signal, which I've heard of the Daily Signal, but I did not know what the purpose of it was. The Daily Signal is the media arm of Heritage Action. They have, news articles, and they have their own YouTube channel, produce all kinds of videos and everything. And also, another thing the trainer mentioned was you can actually sign up for a Google alert for your member of Congress. So, a couple of these things I'm definitely going to start doing. All these new tools are out there, but you have to take the initiative to use them, right? Right. And she also talked about they did some national surveys on the issue of life, single-payer health care, political correctness, socialism, fixing immigration, and job automation and outsourcing. Okay. Then we're getting towards the end of our meeting. We had Michael LaPaglia showed up, who's a candidate for Secretary of State, and Mark Robinson, who's a candidate for Lieutenant Governor, showed up too at the end of this meeting. Unfortunately, these were just cameo appearances. For some reason, they were not given an opportunity to speak to the crowd. I don't know what happened here and why they were not given that opportunity. From being there in the meeting room, it looked like that Catherine Whiteford ran the business meeting, okay, and then her time was over, and then Heritage Action ran their meeting, and then we had the RNC guy come in, and basically him wanting to do the robocall training. So what should have happened was Catherine Whiteford should have, and I'm being friendly, Catherine. Okay, I'm not trying to call you out or anything, but you or somebody on the executive board should have made a motion to have Michael Paglia and Mark Robinson just speak, give them like 2 or 3 minutes each to speak. Because they showed up, they made the effort to show up and speak to the YRs. Not a lot of people want to do that. They still think the YRs are some sort of, are your older brother's drinking club, and that's just not the case anymore. So when we have candidates show up, we need to let them speak. Okay? And sorry if I'm being kind of mean on that, but that's what I think. Okay, now we have the RNC. Our service project for the day was making a robocalls for Louisiana gubernatorial candidate Eddie Rispone and Attorney General candidate Kyle Ardoin. Okay, I'm very pleased to tell you that as a group, and we did robocalls for about an hour or so. We made 3,467 phone calls, right? That's great. About a group, about 10 or 15 of us. About half the group left, unfortunately. Bunch of lazy knuckleheads. I'm kidding, but a dedicated group of us made phone calls because on that day, November 16th, you had the runoff election for governor and attorney general. Now let me talk about Louisiana politics for a little bit. It is a strange animal. On October 12th, you had the general election. But the general election is not necessarily the final election. The only thing general about the general election is the top 2 candidates in each race, in each state race, move on. And they then go to a runoff, which happened on November 16th, okay? And look, John Bel Edwards, the Democrat, got reelected as governor. Now, the media wants to portray this as a big loss for Donald Trump. But I'm here to tell you that is a load of bull, okay? Because look, here's the thing. John Bel Edwards, despite most Democrats, is actually fairly moderate and even in some cases conservative. He actually signed some pretty controversial pro-life legislation that about 98% of the Democratic Party hates. Okay, so he actually signed some pretty good pro-life legislation. Another thing I will say is that look at the 2015 gubernatorial race. You had David Vitter, former congressman, who he was tarred and feathered by the media because he had cheated on his wife. Okay, John Bel Edwards won his first race as governor in 2015 by a 12-point margin. Okay, or you can say 140,000 votes out of 1.2 million votes cast. In 2019, remember, Donald Trump is now president, so he goes everywhere and does rallies to pump up the base and also to pump up Republican candidates in various races, right? With Donald Trump's help now, John Bel Edwards only won by a 2-point margin, or only 40,000 votes out of 1.5 million votes cast. Okay. Also, keep in mind that the GOP in Louisiana won every single council of state race. For Kyle Ardoin, he got reelected by a 60-40 landslide margin. Okay. Also, keep in mind the GOP in Louisiana gained a super majority in the state Senate. Fortunately, they held the House, but they did not get a supermajority in the House, just a supermajority in the state Senate. So John Bel Edwards, if he dares, can still veto Republican legislation in Louisiana. But still, a very, very strong showing by Republicans in Louisiana. And if John Edwards would have vetoed that pro-life bill, he probably would have been defeated, And if he were as liberal and as communist as Roy the Cooper Pooper is here in North Carolina, he probably also would have been defeated. So you can tell that the Republicans are in a very, very good shape down in Louisiana. Okay, don't let the media tell you that Trump had a bad loss in Louisiana. He did not. No. You can also say the same thing about Kentucky. No. Republicans hold majorities in the state legislature in Kentucky. They hold every single Kansas state seat in Kentucky as well. They lost the governorship, but it was really only because Matt Bevin might have stepped on a few too many toes. That's the opinion of a lot of Republican strategists, I will say. Just stepped on a few too many toes, pissed a few too many people off. Okay. Alright, well, that is all I have to say. Anyway, I am the conservative Pelican. I'm also a young Republican. Please support us if you can. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.